Okay, so we're going to talk about one of the great fire service debates among pump operators, which is the tank to pump valve, right here, okay? I bet if you were to contact apparatus manufacturers, they would say about 50% of the rigs they make, in is open and out is closed. And the other 50%, in is closed and out is open. The natural way these valves want to be, obviously, is when we open a valve, we pull out, so that's the default. But a lot of agencies like running with the tank to pump open, so they, hey, flip it. It's very common, and because we want it always open. Water right now, water's on demand. It does help some processes, and it does slow some other processes down or potentially negatively affect some processes, okay? Generally speaking, the first thing you do when you get out of the rig, you put a rig in pump, is, if you don't have that option, is, okay, open the tank to pump, get water to the pump. Number one move. If you're in an agency that has it already open, that step is now removed from your process. But it's a little more nuanced than that, okay? So it's a very simple pro and con. You could put 10 things on each, but we're just going to talk about some of the bigger issues, the ones that people keep talking about. So having the tank to pump in and open and not isolating it after you get a hydrant. The pros of this is, if you think of your tank as your insurance plan, right? This is overdraft protection, right? This is something good. We're going to need this in case the hydrants go out. Then remember that you essentially have your insurance plan activated when it's open. If the hydrant blows up, if the water system fails, whatever, boom, you got your water. But you need to understand that, right? Because that can be both a pro and a con. But hey, it's activated. If something goes wrong, I have uninterrupted water, which is helpful, right? Hydrant blows up, and I'm at the panel, and I know this is happening, and I'm watching my compound gauge. There is a seamless transition, which in principle is great for the crews inside. And then in reality, if you've ever talked to crews who've been on fires when they've lost water, and we didn't get to deal with that today, but the 7-Eleven fires is one of the ones that happened. It was a very scary moment for those crews in there, even just a slight interruption in their water, and they're in a fully involved structure fire. It can be a little nerve-wracking. So that's the value. Your water is uninterrupted, okay? But the downside of that same thing is when you're pumping large volumes, I've seen it most common in training drills with the ladder pipe. Someone who's new, training to be a driver, maybe a little less attentive, is trying to get a giant volume of water and maybe more than the hydrant can actually provide. And when they're doing that, if the tank to pump's open and you're not vigilant and you don't know all the warning signs of your tank going down, you're not watching this thing, for example, no lights, no buzzers on this one, you won't know it, and if you don't look, until you're cavitating. So with people like that, it's essentially siphoning off. So let's just say you're pumping 1,000 and the hydrant's only giving you 900 gallons per minute. Well, you've got 5 minutes, and you might not know it until it's too late. And then at that point, because you activated your insurance plan when the incident started, you have no overdraft protection anymore. You have no more insurance plan. So that has to deal with the unattended driver, right? So this guy who's not attentive for whatever reason, maybe it's just a bad day, or maybe in general he doesn't train, he's not on his stuff, no water left, and he's got no options. If it's an interior crew thing, that's it. We're out of stuff, okay? And then the other thing, which is small, is that with the valve always open for the life of the rig, except when you draft, unexercised valves generally won't function when you need them. So if you never use that valve ever, and then now is a time when you do want to close it for a drafting, for condition test, whatever, it's probably not going to work because it's kind of stuck in that one position. All these rigs like to be exercised, okay? So that's the value, some of the issues with it open. Now isolating the tank to pump closed. The values is it's still an insurance plan. This is still our backup system if the water goes out, but it's on demand, right? Like your cable, only if you ask for it, only if you need it, only if you're in that jam is it. So it won't automatically kick in. You're gonna have to call, State Farm. You gotta call your agent and get that going. Okay? For the unattentive driver, we don't like to teach to the lowest common denominator, but for the unattentive driver, if something goes wrong and he hears that cavitation from losing the hydrant, oh no, I still have my insurance plan. I'm gonna go ahead and do that, okay? It's just something to think about. And then because we exercise the valve daily, it ends up keeping it functional. The cons, right? The downside of isolating the tank is if you're away from the panel and the hydrant goes out of service and the failure happens, they are out of water. That interrupts the cruise flow. If you're right next to the panel and you do it real quick, it's probably seamless. But if you're not, and on a 2-person engine company, 3-person engine company, you could be away. You could be throwing, you could be helping with forcible entry, you could be throwing a ladder, could be doing something that brings you away. And if something catastrophic happens, that's the downside. It's going to interrupt their fire flow. And that could be bad or it could be horrible. And another downside is, even if you are attentive, it does add a step in that emergency scenario when they got to back out. It adds a step to giving them water. So that's another downside to it, because now you have to remember, oh, the hydrant just exploded. Somebody crashed into it. Don't forget, pull it out, okay? But either way is a good way. Either way is a working way. The issue is, are you trained for the way your agency does it? That's the most important part. So when we're talking about fire service debates, it could be smoothbore versus fog. I could spend 2 hours telling you why smoothbore is the best nozzle and the best option, and why if you don't have it, you're negligent. And if I felt like being a devil's advocate, I'd go the other way and go, fog nozzles give you way more options. If you're going smoothbore, you don't know what you're doing. Lower pressures, they kink more easy. We could do that all day, okay? We talked about it yesterday. The NFPA has gone back and forth on whether SCBA should be in the cab or in the compartment. And we talked about how some are all in, some are all out, and some departments have some in and some out in the compartments. And then hose. Some agencies want you doing dead lays because they want their officers having to look and see how much hose do I want to stretch. They want their pump operators a little more engaged in the process. Some say, hey, fast water, fast attack is what's best for fire. We want pre-connects. And whole days have been dedicated. Whole websites have been dedicated to these issues. So here's the key. For the rest of your fire service careers, we are always searching for the best practices. And that is not a definitive answer for the entire fire service. That is a definitive answer for your agency, for your staffing, for your tools, and for your skill set, okay? Volunteer agency with nobody at the firehouse, when you talk about skill set, we probably can't get too complex with that volunteer agency, right? We need to keep it nice and simple. We don't know who's coming. We don't know how many people are coming. For your agency, the driveways in Hillsborough are different than most of the driveways in San Bruno, okay? So when we're talking pre-connects and dead lays, when we're talking some of these debates, what fires are you fighting, okay? If there are no standpipes and high-rises in your department, then that's going to change your hose layout, the way you spec your rigs. And then for your staffing, right? Especially with some of these debates, if you have a 4 or 5 person engine company, you can do a lot more. You can be a lot more disciplined. But there's rarely, you guys need to know this for your careers, there's rarely only one right way. Very rare. And then we get back to this paradigm that we discussed on day one. Complex versus simplex operations, training standards, tools. If you choose complex, if you decide you're going to have all your holes rolled up individually and you're going to roll them all out, that's fine. That's a very complex operation to put out a fire. You could do it, but you better be disciplined in the way you write your manuals, the way you hire, the way you train your individuals, and then the way you respond under stress. Because if you're not disciplined, that complex operation is going to go bad. On the flip side, if you are undisciplined, and it's not meant as a knock, if you don't have enough time, if we have ALS medic training, and we have USAR training, and hazmat training, and all this training, we don't have time for complex operations on that because we do so much now in the fire service. Then on those operations, the infrequently used skills, the high risk, low frequency stuff, make it simplex, okay? That's what your pre-connects do for you. That's what your adjustable gallonage, your fog nozzles, your combinations do for you. You're going, look, I need this to be a simple operation. I can kind of have my cake and eat it too, all right? When you get to the place where you're making policy or you're making decisions or developing your fire service opinions, only 2 things you need to focus on for your career, your agency, your company, maybe. Are your goals realistic? And are your goals achievable? Okay? Those are huge. You can ask anything of your people, but if it's unrealistic, you say in the policy book it says all first 2 engineers need to go up to 500 feet and hand lay their line, right? That's a great policy. It frees up a whole engine company. Is that realistic? Probably not. Maybe with some of your, CrossFitters, some of your real fitness studs, but probably not. It's probably not that. And is it achievable? Department-wide, agency-wide? Probably not. So when you get into these fire service debates at the coffee house, at the lunch and dinner table, at the back of the table, or at the end of a fire, when you're passing judgment, just think about all those things. What are we doing for our agency? And are our goals for training and operations realistic and achievable? So that's the tank to pump, guys.